Valley Stream families. My name is Christian Bowen. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in the Valley Stream Central High School District. I'm very glad that you were able to join us tonight for our first parent forum as part of the Summer Bridge program. We recognize that we abruptly changed from having your child in school every day with us to working with them in a remote setting away from our schools. As such, your world and your child's world has changed very quickly. The district felt it was very important to connect with your children and you over the summer as we transition back to school and address your concerns. As such, we began collaborating across all buildings to bring you a social emotional summer bridge program. The purpose of this program is to address the difficulties our community has experienced and to provide support and guidance in adapting positively in the world around us. As shared in the first newsletter, if you did not see it, we have developed 5 student forums with different topics, as well as 2 parent forums for this month. Today, the topic of our discussion is coping and balancing strategies for dealing with uncertainty. We have a panel of staff members from multiple buildings who have worked together to assist you tonight. Tonight, we have Ms. Abate, Health and Phys Ed teacher from North, Dr. DeMeo, District Director of Instructional Services, Ms. Kehoe, psychologist from North, Ms. Paridi, school counselor from North, Ms. Perez, psychologist from Central, and Dr. Shidman, psychologist from South, as well as Ms. Whitney Rivera, our District Director of Guidance. The format of this forum, if you have not been around for any of the student forums, is a webinar. So our presenters will speak to you and you will see their faces, but they cannot see or hear you. We have enabled the chat feature, which allows you to communicate any questions you have related to coping and balancing, dealing with uncertainty, supporting yourself or your child. And those panel questions that come up will be addressed at the end of the presentation. I ask that if you have any questions about the reopening of school, please ask those questions either at the principal-led parent forums, or we have 2 student forums coming up, transitioning to middle and high school, as well as on August 26th, what will schools look like? We appreciate you joining us today and hope that you can join us again on August 26th in the evening when we will discuss how to support your child's transition back to school. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shidman, who will begin our presentation. Thank you.
Tonight, we are going to be talking about coping and balancing and strategies for helping your child and really helping your child cope and really as we go into another school year. Parents supporting ourselves or yourselves. And if you look in front of you, if you've ever been on an airplane, here are the instructions to putting on an oxygen mask if the cabin pressure changes in an airplane. And what you notice is that the instruction is to put your mask on first before you put your child's mask on. And that's there for a reason, because as parents, we typically want to help our children before we help ourselves. And that's a natural instinct. But again, the very rule here, and the reason it's the rule, is to put your mask on first, because if you lose oxygen, then there's no way that you can help your child in that situation. And that really is a good metaphor for our lives and helping our children in general, because if we're not doing our best or doing something to take care of ourselves, especially during this difficult time, then it will be much being strong. But when we think about the definition of strength, especially during this time, what is it really, and how should we define this notion of strength? So if you take a look here, you see a picture of a tree and a blade of grass. And if I were to ask you which one is stronger, a lot of you, and myself included, would probably say the tree. The tree stands strong, it's tall. But what happens to the tree in a storm? You know, we've had a few storms. You know, I've had a tree go down in my backyard, and that's what happens during a storm. The trees fall. But the blade of grass during that storm, if you think about it, what happens? It waves side to side. Even in the toughest of rains and winds, that blade of grass, even if it's at a 90-degree angle, it's fully down. And that's because it's flexible. That's because it sways side to side, and it adjusts and does what, and sways while the storm is going on. And so when we think, as I said, when we think about strength during this time, it's important that we include flexibility, because we've all been confronted, all of us all over the world have been confronted with some very difficult situations. And it's really the way that we've been able to cope with them and bounce back with them that's mattered. That's kind of going into resilience, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the presentation. When COVID kind of happened, when all of this started to happen and schools shut down and really the world shut down back in March, we thought, okay, this will be next month, maybe the month after, and now here we are about to go into another school year. And things are drastically different between school, between work, everything. Things are drastically different, and people are starting to, including our children, are starting to lose hope. Things may never get back to normal, they may be thinking. And so in order to help cope with the current times for ourselves and to really help our children cope, I thought about a psychological concept that really is used to help people cope and treat depression, and that's called behavioral activation. And behavioral activation, really by definition, you see the Nike sign there in front of you, and the logo is just do it. So it's not about waiting for motivation, because when we feel down, depressed, hopeless, we lose motivation to do the things that we've once enjoyed. And so behavioral activation is about doing despite not having motivation or even not wanting to do something in the moment. So when we think about washing dishes or doing a task, a work task, a project, homework assignments, we don't want to, a lot of the times, we don't want to do them, but we'll do them and we'll feel accomplished after. But when it comes to starting to get down and hopeless, we stop doing things like talking to friends, going outside in a safe way, meeting up with others, artwork, cooking, all of the things that we've once enjoyed, we stop doing them. So again, the concept here is do, and then you will feel better. And if you see the cognitive triangle here in front of you, everything that we do, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior are all connected. And so when we can do something, we can kind of get into that system with our behavior. So if we think about doing something like even exercising or going for a walk, that one is particularly important because there we have the natural chemicals in our brain, our endorphins. When we exercise, they kind of start to fire and we start to naturally feel better.
And if you look at the triangle directly next to that, that's what we call the health triangle and health education. And that's something that we emphasize as almost like a tripod. Your child's physical, social, and mental health cannot be a strong tripod if one of them is weakening. So kind of as Dr. Schindman was saying, it's all interconnected.
In thinking about hope, I started to also think about Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist he was a Jewish man, and he lived during the time of World War II during the Holocaust. He and his wife were taken prisoner, and Viktor Frankl spent some of his time in the most difficult concentration camps out there. And during his time there, he watched and he paid attention to who survived the horrible conditions of the camps and who didn't. And under the same conditions, what was the difference between those who survived and those who didn't? And what he found was that the people that survived the horrible conditions maintained some hope and made meaning of their lives and even of their suffering. When Viktor Frankl, he survived obviously, and when he came out of the camps, he started what's known as logotherapy, which is still alive and well today, and it literally means healing through meaning. So with everything that he observed and studied during his time in the camps, he found that 3 things can really help people instill hope and make meaning of their lives. And the first one is creating a work or accomplishing some task. And that could be creating a piece of artwork, creating a meal, cooking something if you like to cook, a task at work or homework assignment, really anything, creating something and accomplishing something. The second thing that Dr. Frankel found was that we get better when we experience something fully or loving somebody, whether that's your partner, your children, or whether you're fully experiencing something, using your 5 senses to experience it. So for example, if you take the same route home every day and you pass by the sun setting, see if you can stop and fully experience with your 5 senses what is happening and watch that sun setting. And the third one, and to me is really the most important one, is the attitude that one adopts toward unavoidable suffering. And so a lot of us to some extent have lost something, are suffering in some way. And while we can't choose what's happening to us, if we could choose, we would end all of this right now. But since we can't, what attitude? How can we perceive this? How can we think about everything that's happening? And what can we do to interpret it in a way that would make it easier for us to cope with it, to tolerate it, and to deal with it? And so we will definitely talk more about that later, but it's, if you can pay attention to the silver lining of things, what is something that you may have more time to enjoy during this time, even though there's a lot of difficult things going on. So resilience is definitely, a hot topic word during this time. And when we spoke about flexibility, a lot of that really is resilience. The definition of resilience is the way that we cope and move past adversity, how we cope with difficult situations. So if we take, I'm going to be talking about storms all night tonight. So if we think about a rainstorm, resilience is our umbrella. So there's still a storm, but what are we doing to get through it? So just a few tips that can help us be resilient. So the first one is identifying the problem. When it rains, it pours. I wasn't kidding. When we have a problem, we a lot of the time there is something else. When we're in a in a negative mood, if we're feeling sad, we start to think about more things that we're sad about. The same goes when we're angry. And so when we're dealing with a problem, a lot of the time we start to think about all the problems that we're dealing with, and our vision kind of gets blurry, and we don't know what our goals are anymore because we're so overwhelmed. And so I know it sounds kind of wacky, but if we can organize our problems and think about which ones can we solve, which ones do we need to solve first before we can get to the other ones. We really can't go faster than one step at a time, or really solving one problem at a time. Check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Is it, identify it, identify how you're feeling, and maybe try to take a step back if emotions are running high. And if you find it difficult to take a break, even 2 minutes in the bathroom to do a little bit of deep breathing if you're able to. Another really important one is not to judge yourself. And that's a difficult one, especially for parents. We're always thinking about what can we do better? Oh, I should have cooked a more nutritious meal. I shouldn't have let them watch TV for 20 hours straight. I should have taken away his phone. I should have. And now we're it's like a snowball turning into an avalanche in ourselves for all the things that we should have and could have done. And that is literally a slippery slope. And so it's important to be kind to ourselves and compassionate. We are all That's a myth. There is no such thing as multitasking. What is really happening is our brains are switching our attention from task to task. And so even though we think we're really good at it, we may be good at switching our attention, we do the best if we focus on one task at a time when we're able to.
Thank you, Dr. Schumann. And during these times, it's important to try to find the positives. This has been a challenging few months in many ways as parents and guardians. We need to just reflect not on just on the hardships, but on the areas we can express accomplishments. So, for example, I have my 8-year-old who learned how to ride her bike without her training wheels during this time. It was a huge accomplishment for her. In these times, it's easy to focus on the challenges and the struggles we face. However, what our children and our students need right now is to focus on their accomplishments, their strengths, and the power of resilience. Just like Dr. Schumann had indicated, resilience is the ability to recover from or adjust to the misfortune of the challenges. So there's always going to be a silver lining, as she had indicated. And that's what we need to work hard into finding for ourselves as parents and guardians, as well as in our children. And this becomes really the key in getting through these difficult times and understanding the flexibility that we all need to be.
So if we go back to Dr. Schumann's example of the oxygen mask at the beginning of the presentation, you know, we can see how important it is for parents to take care of themselves so they could better take care of their children. And I know that every household is different. Some have 2 parents, you know, or caregivers, some have 1. And that does make a difference. You know, if you're in a 2-parent household, the 2 caregivers, you know, rely on each other, talk to each other, you know, don't make all your conversations about the kids, you know, check on each other's day, swap responsibilities. You know, having a partner can really help you from getting overwhelmed, and then vice versa. Share responsibilities, you know, swap them. Really use that other person as an advantage for you. And make sure you take time together. You know, it's okay to have a movie or a date night if the kids are sleeping or if a family member takes them. It's important to spend time together and as a family as well. If you're a single parent or a caregiver, you know, even though it's harder, that you still need to find that time for self-care. You still deserve it, whether it's reading a book in the living room, you know, doing yoga in the living room for a few minutes, asking a family or, you know, friend to, you know, watch the kids for a night so you can take some time for yourself. It's really important and necessary for you to find that time to decompress, you know, reflect on what's going on and relax. And it's okay for that to happen. You know, everyone needs to de-stress regardless of the parent situation at the home.
Right. And for me, for my self-care break, sometimes it doesn't come often since I have a 6-year-old. But when I can, I like to go for a run or a nature walk, and it helps me feel a little bit more grounded and come back to my family with a more positive mindset.
I myself, just like Ms. Perez, I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, as I shared earlier, and I try to take about an hour, maybe 2 hours if I can, a day for me. And like we've indicated, it could be going for a walk. It could just be going upstairs in my room and just putting on a TV show that interests me. I find that in doing that, I find to restore my energy, and I'm able to give back to my children more than when I'm feeling I'm giving them my everything and I have nothing left. So really recharging once a day for even as less as 30 minutes really gives me the strength to give them the attention they need during this time.
And, you know, another way that parents can, you know, help themselves is letting their kids help. You know, not everyone may see it, but kids do really like to help, and they like to feel important and needed. So, you know, especially older kids, they can help prepare meals. They can do laundry with you, take on tasks for you, whether together or alone. It's a way, you know, to foster family communication and spending time together, and also teaching, you know, your kids valuable life skills that they're going to need in the future. If there's multiple kids in the home, you can even make it fun. You know, first person to finish their chores gets to pick dessert or the game for family game night. You know, it doesn't always have to be money, because that can be, you know, a struggle for families as well. It could just be something as picking dessert or the game. And a lot of kids will have questions during these times. I mean, we all have questions, and it's okay not to know all the answers. You know, it's a very unprecedented time. So if you don't have the answers, look them up together, you know, and you're kind of also showing your kids that not everyone has all the answers. And you sometimes do have to do your own research and figure out really what's going on. Another important thing is, you know, sometimes we use friends or family members as support systems, but then we find we may need a little more, whether it's seeing a mental health counselor, a therapist, psychologist outside of the home. You know, therapy used to be something that was really stigmatized and not talked about. And now we're in a time where it's applauded and supported. You know, just like you would want your child to ask for help, you know, you're showing them that it's okay to ask for help because you're doing it yourself too. And there's tons of resources out there. At the end, we're going to share some links, but one of them is Long Island Crisis Center. It's a website. They have a hotline, a messaging app, email, and you could literally tell them what you have going on, whatever it is, remain anonymous, and they'll point you in the right direction, even give you some resources. Nassau Cares also came out with an app during COVID because of the need for mental health resources. So that's another thing you can download, or your child can download, and it will connect you to certain resources.
All right, looks like I'm back again, just in time. So a lot of our expectations of our children can sometimes really make it more difficult for us if we are expecting things from our kids that are beyond their developmental level. Let me explain. So if we think about something like attention span, if we think about our child, you know, sitting behind their screen, especially with remote learning, and we want them and expect them to, you know, finish their assignment, you know, just sit there and finish it. And that's kind of unrealistic, because if we think about the part of our brain, our frontal lobe, that's responsible for our ability to pay attention, plan, switch our attention, all of these things that are related to organization, that area of the brain is not fully developed until the age of 26. And so if we can be mindful to things like that in our children's development, then we may find that we're less frustrated. Even myself, I found myself, I have a 2-month-old and a 3-year-old, and I find myself asking the 3-year-old, well, can you get me a diaper for the 2-month-old? And then she'll get distracted by a doll walking across the room. And initially I'm getting frustrated. And then I'm like, wait a minute, she's 3. So just things like that, checking in with ourselves and what we're thinking, what we're feeling, can a lot of the time just taking a breath before we respond can be very helpful. I know it is for me. Another thing that we touched on earlier were the shoulds. You know, I should be doing this. I should be, you know, really where they all wind up is I should be a better parent. And so the parent guilt, you know, a lot of the time so I'll give you another example with my 3-year-old, you know, because there's a baby in the home, she watches her devices a lot more than I would like her to. And so rather than feeling guilty or you know, getting on myself for that, or getting angry or with myself, I'll just say, you know what, this is what it's going to be today. And since March, I'm sure we've all had a lot of those days. And if we can just resign to that and say that we are doing our best, then I think a lot of us will feel a lot better. And best is a tricky word because it changes. Us doing our best one day may look very different the next day. If we had no sleep, or we're not feeling well, or we, you know, anything out there, if we're, you know, not prepared for something or don't know something, you know, our best looks very different. And so it doesn't mean that it's not our best. And that's something that's also important to remember, that we are all doing our best, and that looks different. Another very important thing, and arguably one of the most important things when it comes to a lot of parent-child relationships, and there's a lot of research out there to support this, is something called validation. And validation just means acknowledging your child's feelings, even if you don't agree with them. So just saying, you know, I understand that you feel sad, scared, guilty, any emotion. There's no such thing as a wrong emotion. But if we don't like the way we feel, or if our children don't like the way they feel, then we start to focus, what can we do about it? When it comes to modeling, so because our children look to us for really guidance and how to behave, it's important that we model for them that it's also okay to feel negative emotions. So for myself, I had a tree fall in my backyard and it kind of destroyed a few of the neighbors' things during the storm. And so obviously when it was all happening, you know, we all felt scared, and my 3-year-old started to ask me what's going on, you know, and she'll ask a lot of the time if we're feeling, you know, she's obviously the child of a psychologist. She asks about feelings, but she'll ask, are you scared? Are you happy? And so I'll say that we're all safe, but I also feel scared, and that's okay. And so I'm showing that I still feel scared or sad or nervous, but at the same time, we're all safe and we're all going to get through things together. Okay, turn it over to Ms. Paridi.
Yes, and as Dr. Shidman said, I know I had the opportunity back in the spring to speak to as many parents, and some of the frustrations I think the parents were sharing with me was their children really lack of motivation during that time, not making meaning of what was happening. And their natural reaction was to shut down and sleep in instead of getting up and getting their school day ready by turning on their computer and starting their assignments. And we do understand that this is their defense mechanism during this time. So we want you to understand as parents and guardians that this is a time, there's a new school year approaches, and we want them for you to help us make them understand the importance of getting up and getting their school day going and making sense from it.
Additionally, I had similar experiences as a classroom teacher. I had students just not choosing to do work because they didn't find the value in it. They didn't feel it benefited their education. If it was a simple survey, how are you feeling, type of thing. And it goes back to logotherapy, that school isn't actually about every individual assignment. It's making meaning of your day and molding your mind to grow and be able to deal with stressors as you get older.
And so even if we think about, back to Dr. Frankel, and we think about how can we make meaning out of filling out a survey when all these other difficult things are going on. And so we can kind of, you know, plan. So what is the meaning of this survey? And we can get ourselves all the way to, well, it's that diploma at the end of the day. And why is that diploma meaningful? So really we can be creative and imaginative as to how we create meaning out of things. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Thank you. So I know we've mentioned a lot about how to help yourself, which of course in turn helps your child, but let's talk about directly helping your child. So I'm sure ever since March, your child's probably had tons of questions about what's going on in the world, what's school look like, am I at risk of getting sick? All these questions that a lot of us probably had as well. All I can say is that to have healthy lines of communication. So let your child talk to you and make sure you have time to talk to them. If you don't feel like you can give your child the attention that they deserve for the questions that they're asking, maybe let them know, hey, I can't answer this right now, maybe in 5-10 minutes when I'm done with X, Y, and Z, and we can have a conversation about that. Being honest, as accurate as you can, is the best way you can help your child as well. Back to what Ms. Kehoe was saying, if you don't know the answer to a question, admit it. It's okay. We're all human. And especially in these trying times, we don't know a lot of the information, and a lot of the information is being changed day by day and by day. As a parent, definitely being able to stay connected to school and your child's schoolwork, whether it be them when they're at home or when they're in the school day, checking in with them, asking how their school day went, and kind of getting a read off of them based on how they respond to you would be a really good indication of how they're feeling based on their experiences in school. As always, modeling is a great idea, but especially modeling basic hygiene and just general healthy lifestyle practices have really helped a lot of people in their mental health by keeping up that routine, as Mrs. Paridi mentioned, to keep up your health overall. I know Mrs. Perez is going to mention some signs to look for in your child's mental health, but if you notice any slight changes that you think isn't exactly how your child typically acts, maybe just keep it under the radar and think about it later on. And I know Mrs. Perez will go into more, but just always just take it a day at a time. Again, we're all going through a lot of different things, and just offer reassurance and validate that what your child's going through is normal, and we're all feeling these emotions right now as well. In regards to media, and we've definitely been turning to the news a lot. We've been turning to social media about information in regards to schools, in regards to COVID. Just maybe keeping an extra monitor on what kind of information your child's taking in, because a lot of that information, like I said, changes day by day, and a lot of it isn't actually accurate. So perhaps if your child is maybe watching or getting information from a news source that wouldn't necessarily be credible, telling your child that, okay, maybe this isn't the best news outlet or media outlet for you to get the most accurate information on. This could actually maybe cause some more worry for you instead. I'd prefer if you watched or read X, Y, and Z. And again, just as best as you can, as best to your knowledge, talk to your child about, you know, just factual information in regards to COVID, in regards to mental health and school opening again, because it's not an easy conversation to have, and especially if you don't have all the facts and figures. Last little touch about social media is that students have not seen each other in a day-to-day capacity since March. And the best form of communication is that face-to-face communication, that quality time where you can read somebody's body language, you can listen to their tone of voice or see their facial expressions. Your children haven't been able to see that or have that as much as friends. They may be FaceTiming, they may be sending iMessages, DMs, Snapchats, whatever the case may be. But that face-to-face in-person interaction has definitely been limited. It does lead to the opportunity for possible bullying or social isolation to happen. So it's not to say that your child will definitely be exposed to this, but it definitely leads to more possibly group chats where not everybody's involved happening, or your child may be feeling a little withdrawn because they're not having that quality friendship like time to time that they're always having, they're used to having in school every single day. So that's just something else to be aware of going back to school might bring about some kind of awkward social interactions that they may not have had to deal with prior.
Thank you, Ms. Abate. So noticing warning signs, what does it mean? Well, during this time of uncertainty, we all may feel many emotions, which is very normal, but we can't dismiss that we're all struggling during this time, and it can be very difficult to tell the difference between sadness and depression, especially in adolescents who normally experience ups and downs. So you may ask yourself, well, does my teen just feel sad, irritable, or overwhelmed by this crisis, or are they slipping into depression? So as parents, we certainly have to be alert and keep an eye out for red flags. So I put together some symptoms that may suggest depression, but before I go over them, I want you guys to keep in mind that we all may experience these symptoms. And what makes it significant and what makes it worrisome is if they are persistent and if they last for at least 2 weeks. Some of the symptoms of depression include, we can move to the next slide, unusual sadness or irritability. Our teens might have a loss of interest in activities they once enjoyed. You might also see some changes in their weight, a shift in their sleep patterns, sluggishness, harsh self-assessment like I'm no good, I'll never make any friends, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, thoughts of or attempts of suicide. If several of these symptoms are present, like I mentioned, for at least 2 weeks, they may suggest depression, but we always need to seek professional help. And I also want to point out that many teens may spend long stretches alone or are being more moody than usual, but that can also be part of how they are coping with this new situation. And as parents, we need to acknowledge to them that this is normal and it's understandable. But if they are sleeping all day or you're going weeks without seeing them or they're displaying some of the symptoms I just went over, then we need to dig a little deeper and take some action. So Ms. Paridi will go over a proactive and a preventative measure we can take as parents to help our teens during this time and for the future.
Thank you. Have said throughout these last few slides, really the key here is parent and child communication. And we do understand that teenagers, traditionally, when you ask them how their day was, it's good. How did you do in school? I learned. They give you one-word answers, and we understand that. But we're asking you that during these difficult days, especially, it is important to find ways and time from our busy schedule to have some type of communication with our children, sitting down over a bowl of ice cream or at dinner time, and really ask them, even bi-weekly, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And each time we ask them these questions, they could be the same answers, but they can be different, because just like ourselves, there's moments of highs and lows, and young kids and young adults feel the same ways. They express them differently, and that's really the difference. So it's important to focus, as I said earlier, on the positive aspects of their life, the things that the teen and the young adult can control, and the opportunities that foster resilience. And these are the times that we need to foster these and put these together. Just like Dr. Shipman has said earlier, when we have the behavioral activation where we have no motivation and we don't know where to begin, it's just kind of like, let's do it. Let's start. Let's get up from the couch and go outside for a walk. Let's get to the kitchen and bake a cake. It's really, as it was indicated earlier, and we all have the capacity of doing this. It's just, as the Nike symbol says, just do it.
That actually just reminded me of a quote I heard like a very long time ago about procrastination. It was, if it takes less than 5 minutes, just do it.
True.
So continuing with the, communication between parents and, their teenagers going, first I had found this quote that I thought was, pretty relevant to parents and their children during this COVID crisis. Our job as parents isn't to provide certainty in a time of uncertainty. Our job is to help kids tolerate the uncertainty. So I just came up with a few points that can it doesn't fix what they're going through, but it could help, them feel better, make it a little smoother. And the first part of that is reassuring them. When you talk to them, stick to the facts, let them know what you know. But the main thing is just to make them feel safe, which I think Ms. Abadi and Dr. Shipman had touched on earlier. Making your kid feel safe will go a long way. Empower them. This is an opportunity to teach them some empathy, some important life skills, caring for the community, whether it's, finding clothes they don't need anymore in their closet and donating them, maybe writing a letter to a healthcare worker, or even checking in on an elderly family member to see how they're doing. All those things are instilling empathy, which are important life skills for them always to have. Another thing is maintaining your own calmness. Kids do what they see. So if they see you staying calm, chances are, it will make them calmer as well. You can help your teen manage their own emotions by just giving them a safe and supportive environment to talk about their concerns without judgment. Let them tell you what they really think, what their questions are, what they're worried about, and just listen. That can go a long way with validating them, which is another thing we talked on earlier. Ms. Abadi mentioned social media, just beware of too much exposure. There's a lot of information out there, but not all of it's accurate. We want our kids to be knowledgeable, but not scared. Educating them on health and safety. Right now I know wearing the masks, social boundaries, all these things are really important during COVID, but washing your hands, being cognizant of how close you are to other people, things like that is still going to be important even after this pandemic's over, whenever that is. So those are important skills they're still going to use. And lastly, routines. September's coming quicker than, all of us realized, and whether it's hybrid, your students going remote, routines are really important. Have them go to bed at a normal time and wake up at normal times. Put those electronics to the side when they're going to sleep, so it's not a distraction. Maybe have one night a week where the family exercises together to get out, that energy. Include a fun, family night, game night, movie night, like we talked about, maybe once a month. Fun things can be part of routines too, and it can help with the family closeness, communication, and it will help them adapt to school easier having that routine in place. You go next slide. Now, these were just the links that we used to get some of this information. Some of this extra things like meditations, you could do with your teen, by yourself. We had mentioned the Nassau CARES app and the Long Island Crisis Center that has resources. And lastly, I just want to mention, you may want to check out the previous coping and balancing presentation that was for students. We gave some good information, some cool apps that are even good for parents, do them together, look at them together and see what works. Everyone's different and something different is going to work for everybody. And I also want to invite you to put whatever strategies and tips that work for you in the chat box. We're all looking for new ideas and everything works differently for everybody. So we welcome your ideas as well.
Thank you. And we thank everyone for logging on today and participating. I know we went over a lot of information, but as a team, we want to know if there's anything specifically you're having difficulty balancing and coping with. And if you can please comment in the chat box below and we'll try to get back to you. And have a wonderful night. Thank you.
I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank the attendees as well for being a part of this. And we hope to be in touch throughout, obviously, the summer, but we expect to continue a program like this throughout the year, because this is a bumpy road, as everyone has shared, and we need to get through this together and think positively. So thank you all.